Our comfortable image of who we are has been repeatedly shattered by science. Astronomy taught us that Earth is not the center of the universe, but merely one object among billions. Biology showed that humans were not specially created, but emerged through evolution like millions of other species. Archaeology has now challenged yet another deeply held belief, the idea that human history over the past million years has been a steady story of progress. Recent discoveries suggest that the rise of agriculture, long assumed to be a decisive step toward a better life, was, in many respects, a catastrophe from which humanity has never fully recovered. With agriculture came social and sexual inequality, disease, and despotism, forces that have shaped and often poisoned human existence ever since. At first glance, this revisionist view seems absurd, especially from the perspective of a 20th-century American mindset. In almost every measurable way, we appear better off than medieval peasants, who themselves lived better than cave dwellers, who in turn lived better than apes. We enjoy abundant and diverse food, superior tools, longer lifespans, and better health than at any previous point in history. Most of us are no longer threatened by starvation or predators. We rely on fossil fuels and machines rather than exhausting physical labor. Who, after all, would willingly trade modern life for that of a medieval farmer, a Paleolithic hunter, or an ape? For most of our history, humans survived through hunting and gathering, pursuing wild animals and foraging for wild plants. Philosophers have often described this existence as nasty, brutish, and short. Without farming or food storage, people had to search for sustenance every single day simply to avoid starvation. This way of life ended only about 10,000 years ago, when people in different parts of the world began domesticating plants and animals. The agricultural revolution has continued to expand ever since, leaving only a few remaining hunter-gatherer societies today. Within the progressive framework in which many of us were raised, it seems foolish to ask why our ancestors adopted agriculture. The answer appears obvious: farming produces more food with less effort. An acre of cultivated land yields more calories than an acre of wild roots and berries. It is easy to imagine weary foragers stumbling upon a lush orchard or a pasture full of sheep and instantly grasping the appeal of agriculture. How long would it really take to see the advantage? Some advocates of progress go even further, crediting agriculture with the explosion of art and culture over the past few thousand years. Stored grain reduced the time needed to secure food, supposedly creating leisure time unknown to hunter-gatherers. Thanks to agriculture, the argument goes, humanity could build the Parthenon and compose the Mass in B minor. Yet while this explanation sounds persuasive, proving it is surprisingly difficult. How can we demonstrate that human life actually improved when people abandoned foraging for farming? Until recently, archaeologists relied on indirect evidence, much of which has failed to support the narrative of progress. One such comparison asks whether modern hunter-gatherers live worse lives than farmers. Several dozen groups around the world still practice hunting and gathering. Studies show that these people often enjoy substantial leisure time, sleep longer, and work far fewer hours than neighboring farmers. The Fekung Bushmen, for example, spend an average of 12 to 19 hours per week obtaining food. The Hadza of Tanzania spend 14 hours or less. When one Bushman was asked why his people did not adopt agriculture like neighboring tribes, he replied simply, "Why should we, when there are so many mongongo nuts?" Hunter-gatherer diets, combining wild plants and animal protein, tend to be nutritionally superior to the carbohydrate-heavy diets of farmers reliant on crops like rice or potatoes. One study found that during a food-abundant month, Bushmen consumed an average of 2,400 calories and 93 grams of protein per day, well above recommended levels for their size. It is difficult to imagine such a population starving in the way thousands of Irish farmers did during the potato famine of the 1840s. This suggests that hunter-gatherer life, at least among surviving groups, is not nearly as miserable as often portrayed, even though farmers have pushed these societies into some of the harshest environments on Earth. Still, modern foragers cannot fully tell us what life was like before agriculture, since they have interacted with farming societies for millennia. To directly assess whether agriculture improved human health, archaeologists turned to paleopathology, the study of disease in ancient human remains. In favorable conditions, paleopathologists have access to remarkably detailed evidence. Well-preserved mummies in the Chilean desert allow for post-mortem examinations, while fossilized human feces from dry Nevada caves reveal parasite infections. Even skeletal remains alone provide a wealth of information. From bones, researchers can estimate sex, age, weight, growth rates, life expectancy, nutritional stress, and evidence of diseases such as anemia, tuberculosis, and leprosy. The results are striking. Skeletal evidence from Greece and Turkey shows that late Ice Age hunter-gatherers averaged about 175 centimeters in height for men and 165 centimeters for women. After the adoption of agriculture, average height declined sharply, reaching 160 centimeters for men and 152 centimeters for women by 3000 BCE. Although height slowly increased in later periods, modern populations in these regions still have not regained their ancestors' stature. Even more dramatic findings come from Native American burial mounds in the Illinois and Ohio River valleys. Around 1150 CE, these communities shifted from foraging to intensive maize agriculture. Studies by George Armalagos and colleagues show severe declines in health, a 50% increase in enamel defects, a fourfold rise in iron deficiency anemia, tripled rates of infectious bone disease, and widespread spinal degeneration from heavy labor. Average life expectancy dropped from about 26 years to just 19. These findings suggest that people did not adopt agriculture because it was preferable, but because it allowed them to feed growing populations. As anthropologist Mark Cohen put it, they traded quality of life for quantity of people. There are clear reasons why agriculture harmed health. Farmers relied on monotonous, starchy diets deficient in essential nutrients. Crop failures posed catastrophic famine risks. Dense populations and trade networks enabled the spread of parasites and infectious diseases. Epidemics such as measles and plague could not exist among small, mobile bands, they emerged only with farming and cities. Beyond disease and malnutrition, agriculture also fostered class inequality. Hunter-gatherers, lacking food surpluses and concentrated resources, could not support ruling elites. Agricultural societies, by contrast, enabled non-producing elites to live off the labor of the sick and malnourished masses. Skeletal evidence from Mycenaean Greece and Chilean mummies shows that elites were taller, healthier, and far less affected by disease. Gender inequality likely deepened as well. Freed from the constraints of nomadic life and pressured to produce more laborers, women in agricultural societies experienced more frequent pregnancies and declining health. Archaeological evidence often shows higher disease burdens among women than men. Contrary to claims that agriculture created leisure and art, modern hunter-gatherers often enjoy as much free time as farmers. Artistic expression long predates agriculture, with stunning cave paintings and sculptures created tens of thousands of years ago. Leisure alone was never the limiting factor. Gorillas have leisure time, yet they do not build temples. What agriculture undeniably produced was a prosperous elite and a deteriorating quality of life for the majority. Rather than asking why humans chose agriculture because it benefited them, we might instead ask how humanity became trapped by it despite its costs. Agriculture supported far higher population densities than hunting and gathering ever could. Groups that adopted farming multiplied, displaced foragers, or eliminated them outright. Those who continued the older way of life were gradually pushed into marginal lands. It was not that everyone willingly abandoned hunting and gathering, rather, those who did not were overwhelmed. Archaeology, often dismissed as irrelevant to modern life, reveals one of humanity's most consequential turning points. Faced with a choice between limiting population growth or increasing food production, humans chose the latter, with far-reaching consequences. The transition to agriculture undeniably enabled technological development, complex societies, and the world we inhabit today. Yet this raises harder questions that cannot be answered by productivity metrics alone. Did this transformation make humans happier as individuals? And as agriculture intensified population growth, ecological strain, and disease pressure, did it also set in motion risks that now threaten humanity itself, through environmental depletion or through an endless evolutionary arms race with viruses, bacteria, and fungi for whom a dense, resource-rich human civilization is an increasingly inviting habitat? Agriculture brought us here. Whether it ultimately represents humanity's triumph, or its most dangerous gamble, remains an open question.